I'm feeling this past year has been anything but neat. I've been rebooting in many ways. In my mind, this was my gap year. I thought, well, why shouldn't I have a gap year? You know, I love this concept of kids who have gap years after school. Why shouldn't I have one after all this time working? And I threw myself into my book. And so I haven't had the gap I expected, but it's been messy. I think partly because I'm having to give up old routines, which is hard. I had to really kind of spin up a little mini company to get this book together.
Obviously, you had an extraordinary career in the corporate world. At GE, you spent the vast majority of your career there and left at the end of last year to take on this new chapter. What did you learn about yourself now transitioning to this very different dynamic of life pace and structure?
I learned I'm much more structured than I thought, so I had to face the reality of me versus this image. You know, I describe myself, I'm a change maker, I love change. Well, not really. I had worked in companies with great teams, and you have these platforms, they're optimized to get stuff done. Suddenly you have to just figure out, how do I get a G Suite account? Where do I get my mail? And something you think is going to take you 5 minutes, 5 seconds, takes 5 hours.
You know, I've also always been struck that you describe yourself as an introvert. How have you learned to use that aspect of who you are to your advantage?
I would show up at meetings and I had ideas and I didn't say anything. And people wouldn't even know I was in the meeting. You know, I mean, I'm sure I was polite, you know, I said hello, but I would leave and I would get so frustrated. So those were the times when introversion held me back. On the other hand, I've come to appreciate that that part of my nature is also good in the workplace. And what do introverts have? We're thoughtful in the way that we observe, because we're not talking, we're quiet, so we tend to be, I think, good listeners. I think I translated that into being somewhat of a synthesizer. So often the way I'd feel comfortable in a meeting is, okay, here's what I think I've heard everybody say, here's 5 ideas that came out of this, as a way to kind of recap.
Well, you talk a lot about the need to really get comfortable with the small failures and day-to-day in your life. Again, easier said than done. How have you gotten better at failing?
We're in this sort of business cycle, and I think a lot influenced by Silicon Valley and our startup culture, you know, fail fast, fail small, fail fast, like it's just like cool, like it's a little model, like I just did it, you know, and now I got funded. Everybody knows that's not true, right? So I think what I worry is that there's so much pressure to just like act like it's easy. I like the idea of just when you finished a project to sort of force yourself, especially a project that's gone well, what didn't go well, what almost couldn't have gone well.
You have 2 daughters, and obviously you've had a very demanding, intense career. How have you learned and how have you gotten better at navigating these different dimensions of your life when oftentimes they can be competing?
My husband and I'll sit down and go like, how did we do it? We don't know. I don't know. We just did it. And I think that's really maybe the message is you just do it. I'd love to tell you I had some organized plan. I'm really proud of my daughters. They're very independent. They're both very creative. I love that about them. But I know there were times work got more of me than they did. I don't like that. I don't feel good about that. But I also know there were benefits of my job. I think hopefully they saw some independence, they saw somebody in me doing what I really like to do. Maybe we all ought to share more as women who work. It's not just a matter of picking up the cookies on the way to the bake sale and you didn't have to bake them. There are big things that don't go right. Your kids sometimes don't do well in school. Your kids struggle, and you know, we're not open enough about some of those things because it's hard.
As you think back to your younger self, what's one piece of advice that you either wish someone had given you or that you wish you had taken?
It's funny you asked that. I just today was looking at pulling out some old photos and stuff, and I found this is when I was 14. I found this old letter or report I had written. It was called Everything You Want to Know About Beth Comstock, *, but we're afraid to ask. Okay, this was, trust me, it was not riveting poetry or prose, but there was this thing and it said, I'm ambitious. And I think I want to be about 50 different things, ! So that was in me at 14. I'm sure it was in me at 22. That's good. Ambition is good. Like, don't be bashful. Don't think it's a bad thing to be ambitious. And you can be 50 different, maybe not 50, but you can be multiple different things.